This is Keys to the Shop, episode 325, How to Manage Your Trainers. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I am your host for the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I really appreciate it. And if you're new to the show, or if you're not new to the show, but you haven't subscribed to Keys to the Shop, go ahead and hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening to this podcast, and you'll always be updated with new episodes as they come out. You'll be updated with all that good information. Thank you so much. And then also, if you love these episodes and what it's done for you, your career, your business, etc., share these episodes with a friend. Just take a moment to share with your team and people that you think that might get something from these as you have. That really helps the show get spread around. And there's tons of people that still don't know about Keys to the Shop and all the cool topics and guests that we have assembled under the Keys to the Shop banner. So that'd be really awesome if you would do that. Now, Keys to the Shop, on top of offering this podcast, does consulting and coaching. That means I get to work directly with you through Keys to the Shop Consulting to help you start your coffee business off on the right foot, or take your existing coffee business and work with you to elevate the operations, management, quality, all the things in between. Just really help it sing. Do problem-solving training. There's a lot of ways that Keys to the Shop Consulting can help you, either remotely or on-site at your locations. And so I'd really love to talk with you and see how I might be able to help you in your coffee business. Go ahead and email chris@keystotheshop.com and see if working together is the right option for you. Again, the email for Keys to the Shop Consulting, chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, today's episode of Keys to the Shop is brought to you by the Ground Control Cyclops brewer from Voga Coffee, which has been revolutionizing the batch brew world for quite a time now, like a long time. They have really been turning things on their head in a good way. They have the SCA award-winning technology in the machine, allows you to have control over such a vast range of flavors in your coffee that you've never really had access to before. Honestly, it's incredible the way that this machine works. It's not just an amazing batch brewer, though. It's also a versatile piece of equipment that allows you to make batched iced lattes, batched cold brew, tea, and it's got a small footprint and it's easy to use. It's really an amazing machine. Go check them out over at groundcontrol.coffee. If you're looking to elevate your coffee's quality, take things to the next level for your customers' coffee experience, and have a versatile piece of equipment that increases your efficiency on bar, then you need to look into getting the Ground Control Cyclops brewer in your cafe. Go find out more information again over at groundcontrol.coffee. Today's episode is also brought to you by the Pacific Barista Series. The Barista Series is the world's leader in plant-based performance beverages because they basically make these for professional baristas, for the standards that professional baristas have, and then they're tested by professional baristas before they're even out in your cafe, before they release any of their extensive lineup. They're tested to make sure they truly perform. They stand up to the heat from steaming. They produce amazing texture for latte art. They keep the flavor balance focused on the coffee. This is all a win-win for you and your customers. To find out more about the Barista Series, go to pacificfoodservice.com and get it in your store. Taste it for yourself. Try it on your bar. Let your staff try it. I really think you're going to be impressed. If you are looking to have the best plant-based beverages available for your customers, then I believe you have to be serving the Barista Series from Pacific. All right, everybody. Well, today I wanted to talk to you about training, in particular, managing trainers. This is one of those areas we've talked about before in regards to managing managers. And in the same vein as managing managers, I think we need to start off with the idea that if you are an owner or somebody who is a quote-unquote boss of somebody in middle management, be it a manager, you're the boss of a manager, or you're the boss of a trainer, whatever, you have a responsibility to them to lead and to facilitate their success. The thing that happens often is when we put managers in place, we like to imagine that the delegation of authority in this role, and that person is taking tasks off of your plate, is somehow going to mean that you don't work as much. And I've always said that it's not that you're not working as much, it's just you're working on different things. You've exchanged responsibilities. It used to be, for instance, with a manager that you would have to write the schedule yourself. Now, typically, you get a manager, the manager is going to write the schedule. That does not mean, though, that you just ignore the schedule forever and ever and just trust that it's going fine until the manager says, oh, I've got a big problem with the schedule. You've got to not just check in on those things. It has to be a normal part of your routine in a part of the structure of your relationship with the person that you've delegated to, that you make sure they have what they need to succeed. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for a lot of heartache, and you're setting them up for failure, and you're going to get frustrated at them. They're going to get frustrated at you, and we all know the song and dance here. I can just hear a lot of your heads wagging, shaking, whatever you're doing to agree with this, if especially you're a manager or past manager. Now, in training, there's, I think, something unique in that the trainer position is plugged in to the world of coffee in a different way than the manager is by necessity. And they are expected to be the sort of point person for the standards of coffee in the company. And so in terms of if you got into coffee because of coffee, let's say it wasn't necessarily because of hospitality, or it was, but you were a really big coffee geek and you really liked coffee and you became a trainer, it feels like this role is an arrival, more so than a managerial role, which more often than not will take you away from the coffee. With this position, there is a lot of opportunity for confusion because, as you know, we have access to an incredible amount of information. And the default that leaders have sometimes is to set somebody in a position and let them go. Bruce Tulgan calls this negligence. When we talk about it as empowerment and we say, we're giving you the reins of training, you're a really good barista, come up with something really great. And it's a big world out there. And without any kind of direction, there is going to be a lot of confusion. And the trainer's role, as coffee-focused as it is still about facilitating the success of individuals with coffee more than it is about being a knowledgeable trainer. We set trainers up for failure when we start allowing them to see themselves as sort of like a wizard on a tall mountain that sits there with all the information ready to answer strange questions about terroir and processing and the latest trends in coffee. And a lot of trainers will feel like, oh man, I need to learn more to be a good trainer. And so they just get sucked into this rabbit hole of content in order to kind of relieve the tension of the insecurity of their role, because the owner or their immediate boss is not giving them clearly defined job descriptions or direction about what they expect from them as a trainer. I learned this as a manager. I don't have to have all the answers to all the questions. If they're questions that are relevant to the job and the things that we serve and what we're doing, I definitely need to find the answers. And once I do, I now have that answer. But what I find happens with trainers is that they just bury themselves in books. They bury themselves in research and videos, and they inflate their ego. They inflate their knowledge, but not really their effectiveness. And how do we solve this? Well, again, this comes down to a failure in leadership, telling a trainer what is expected in the job description, and then leading them throughout their, at least the first year of being a trainer, so that the expectations can become habit. So the first thing that we have to get right here is that we can't assume that staff do not need direction. We can't manage hands-off. That's negligence. We have to be hands-on managers. We've got to say, look, if the trainer that I put in place to make sure that all of our staff are trained well is frittering away their time in, books and videos that are just kind of like mainly superfluous knowledge, while somebody on a bar somewhere in our fleet of stores is still really burning their cappuccino milk, we're truly missing the point here. People need direction. There's a natural pull that a trainer will have to the theoretical, into the office, into accumulating knowledge, and we need to provide direction. One of the ways we do that is through structured job descriptions that are a roadmap for what a trainer will do with their time when they are a trainer. How much admin time are you giving this trainer? What kind of things is the trainer working on during the admin time? Is it just like, I'm going to enrich myself by watching, old WBC routines and hope that some of the knowledge trickles over to our coffee bars? I mean, I wouldn't want to pay a trainer to watch videos for hours, hoping that some of the information got to my baristas. I want to know what they're working on. I'm not talking about micromanaging, but I want the efforts that they're putting in to at least have some, relevance to what we're doing in the business. That's why I'm paying them. And that's ultimately what's going to give them satisfaction too, because they're going to eventually get to the point where they realize, I'm not an effective trainer. I feel like I'm wasting my time. I'm getting all this knowledge and I'm not able to use it. And then guess what they think? Oh, I got to go to a different place where I can use all this knowledge. And rarely are you going to find a coffee bar where you can use all the knowledge that you have about coffee. So we have to be specific and talk about, okay, so here's how many hours you work on bar. Those bar hours are structured in such a way that you are scheduled with people who have, as much as we can, specific needs. The way I used to do this when I worked in operations was to include the trainer in the schedule making, which happened every Monday. And that trainer had an allotted number of bar hours that would be scheduled based on what the managers knew that their staff needed, because the managers are working all the time with the staff. So in the office, if you're making the schedule with the trainer there, you say, you know what, Chris has some problems with his latte art, or he's been having problems with cappuccino milk temperature. I would love to have you for your bar shifts this next schedule to come on bar with him. And that way you kill two birds with one stone. One, you are able to help Chris with his terrible cappuccino milk. And two, you can also continue to be in touch with the realities of the bar as a trainer and not just be a trainer who doesn't work bar shifts and just does lab work, which is terrible, terrible, terrible. You still need to work some bar shifts as a trainer. You can't just be a coffee educator in a lab and expect to have any kind of effectiveness in your position when you can't empathize and identify problems in and all that fun stuff with the actual bar work that you're training people for. So that's one thing. The other is when there's admin time, it has to be approved projects, and those projects have to have a start date and they have to have an end date. We're talking about due dates. Okay, so I could work on a project that, I could work on a project indefinitely, right? It's never going to be perfect. But if my boss tells me, okay, you've got, say, 8 hours of admin time or 10 hours of admin time per week, then you can work on this project. Maybe it's a manual, maybe it's a training exercise, or drawing up the plans for a new training lab. Whatever it is, it has to be a collaborative process, and it has to be something that you stay in touch with and manage. So give them a due date. Instead of saying, I gave them this idea to do this thing, or I wanted them to work on this, but they haven't started it yet, or they haven't come to me yet, and I just don't think that people are taking it seriously. You've got to say, okay, let's do this. I want this done by this time. And that way, there's no ambiguity. You have commissioned the project to begin. There's a lot of ideas that get thrown around in management meetings, in one-on-one meetings, but unless a direct report hears their boss tell them that they are to go out and do that thing, it still is in the realm of idea and not commission. So be very specific. Be very clear. Tomorrow, we're going to start this project, and let's make a goal of having it done by this time. Go so far as to put it on a calendar and invite that person on Gmail to that meeting where the agenda on the meeting says review of first draft of barista manual or espresso basics checklist or whatever it is that you've decided that they need to do. Now, of course, you might be hearing this thinking this applies to other areas too. Of course it does. This is something that you need to do with anybody that you're managing. Life gets busy, and we need borders. We need help around us to remind us about the things that we've committed to. All of us do, and trainers included. So having due dates and specific expectations, very, very critical. And then follow up. So if it's a 3-week process where you've told them, okay, we're going to start this project and we're going to check in on the first draft on this date, you can put on your calendar when you want to check in with them to see how things are going and also be prepared to problem solve and to help them iterate the process. Because this happens all the time in my client work as a consultant. I come in with the idea that I'm going to work on one thing. As we're working on it, we find something else out that changes everything. It's way bigger than we thought it was going to be, or there's a source of a problem that it was really unexpected, but absolutely needs to be addressed. And that's not something you want somebody just making stuff up for without your involvement, because sometimes it can be pretty tricky. It can be intertwined with other areas of the business that they don't have authority in. So having some points of follow-up and being prepared to problem solve and iterate with them is really critical, because as I've said in past episodes, you have to be an agent of clarity and resourcing for the people that you lead. Without that, you're going to let people just make these decisions that you end up not being pleased with, and then it's unfair to them because you're unpleased. They don't like that you're not pleased, and ultimately, nobody likes to be in that position. Now, I'm going to also mention about training, and maybe this is more in line with giving advice to people who are trainers, as much as it is to people who are managing trainers, and that is, the focus needs to be on the practical basics of the bar and not the esoteric knowledge of coffee beyond what the customers are going to your coffee bar for. It's the classic thing about like latte art, for example, which is fine. Love latte art, but people tend to over-focus on things like, focusing on pouring a swan or pouring some fancy design because the basics of their job are not being focused on by those around them. Latte art is the point of excitement. And when the other areas, the basics of bar work, are not points of excitement, that's a cultural failure of leadership to make it exciting, to reinforce the how that's a value of ours. Okay, we've abandoned people to fill in the gap of what's valuable about working the bar, and oftentimes that's either changing the Spotify playlist or latte art and so forth. So as a trainer, you got to focus on the basics and you hold yourself accountable. Realize that you're going to have the temptation to start going on and on about things that ultimately, when it comes to having a successful bar shift, kind of don't matter. We're going to talk about people in coffee who are famous and their extraction theories, and we can't get people to tamp correctly. And it seems like a blow to the ego almost to not focus on those things as a trainer and only, at least initially, focus on those basics because it seems too basic. It seems like, shouldn't I be doing something else? And the answer is more or less no. I always say if you're successful in training with your materials, with your onboarding, with the actual training process, follow-up, and bringing people to maturity as baristas, as a team of baristas, you should know the quality level and idiosyncrasies of every barista's drink of any kind on the menu. So I should know at store one who's making great mochas, cappuccinos. Is everyone making pretty much really good cappuccinos? Who's making the worst ones? Who's making the best ones? Why is that? What am I going to do about it? It's like Danny Meyer talks about the salt shaker in his book, Setting the Table. The point of management is, the salt shaker gets moved from the center of the table where you want things. You always move it back. It's never going to be, left alone. That's just business. You have to move things back to the standard you want them to be. In training, that is a forever thing where you're constantly making sure that people are just nailing the menu, nailing their hospitality and workflow and cleanliness and serving their peers well on the bar. There's so many different areas that you don't necessarily need to go into a deep study session online to figure out. You just need to apply the basics consistently across the board in a structured way, and with the help of owners and bosses of trainers to hold you accountable to that and be a collaborative part of the process and facilitate your success through resourcing, clear direction, things like due dates and schedules and specifics and problem solving and all that fun stuff. Then you end up with really great results. So I hope that this episode has been helpful today. It's something that's been on my mind because, like I said in the beginning, trainers can easily be left to their own devices and just kind of cobble things together from the greater industry. If we want to build better coffee bars, better baristas, and find great satisfaction in our work and provide awesome experiences for our customers, we're going to start with how we do that for the people that we lead. So if you have any questions, comments, or feedback about this episode or any other episode of Keys to the Shop, feel free to drop me a line, chris@keystotheshop.com. And that's also where you can contact me if you're interested in Keys to the Shop consulting. That's chris@keystotheshop.com. Now this year, Coffee Fest turns 30 years old. That is 30 years of the best trade show for coffee retailers. If you want to learn how to start and operate and thrive as a coffee retailer, Coffee Fest trade shows are the place to go. I've been going since 2004 as a trainer, a judge, a speaker, and it has just gotten better and better. And this year, Coffee Fest is going to be going to New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and Seattle. And if you're interested in taking yourself and your team to Coffee Fest, you can get 50% off general admission for all the 2022 shows by using the code KEYS, KEYS, when you're registering over at coffeefest.com, which I highly recommend you go check out. There you can peruse all of the lectures, trainings, workshops, competitions, everything happening at Coffee Fest, and it's a lot. So again, use the code KEYS, KEYS, for any of the shows for 50% off general admission over at coffeefest.com. And with that, that is the end of our show today, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. I really appreciate you. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.